This appointment and meet and render their decisions without a lot of input from the United States Congress. That's one of the big dangers of setting up this board.
Well, Congressman, thanks so much for joining us today on the Washington Journal.
Glad to be here. Thank you, sir.
And that's today's show. We'll take you now live to the House floor, where the House will be considering the National Strategic and Critical Mining Production Act of 2012.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., July 12, 2012. I hereby appoint the Honorable Shelley Moore Capito to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. God of the universe, we give you thanks for giving us another day. As the members of this people's house deliberate these days, give them the wisdom and magnanimity to lay aside what might divide us as a people, to forge a secure future for our country. We pray for all people who have special needs. May your presence be known to those who are sick, that they might feel the power of your healing spirit. Be with those who suffer persecution in so many places in our world, and bless our troops who are engaged in the easing of those sufferings. Give to all who are afraid or anxious, or whose minds are clouded by uncertain futures, the peace and confidence that come from trust in your goodness and mercy. Inspire the men and women who serve in this House to be their best selves, that they may in turn be an inspiration to the nation and to the world. May all that is done here this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Holtgren.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, I request permission to address the Council.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to express concerns on behalf of my constituents. Paralysis, uncertainty. These are the effects of inaction. Inaction on looming massive defense cuts that will go into effect in January 2013. In America's First District, many small businesses exist to support our military, to innovate and to build systems and resources for our troops that save lives and help them do their job on the battlefield. But these businesses face an uncertain future as the question of looming defense cuts or sequestration remain unresolved. Do they stop production? Do they lay off workers? This spring I voted with a majority in this House to avoid these massive defense cuts while putting the nation's budget on a path to balance. The Senate has failed to act. The President has threatened to veto. Our military and those who support it and the national security of this country demand our attention and respect. Leaving this issue to the last minute is irresponsible. Now is the time for action. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purposes, gentlelady from New York rise? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 2 weeks from tomorrow, Olympics athletes from all over this world will parade into the stadium in London to officially launch the 2012 Olympics. I am so proud to say that 5 of them will be Western New Yorkers that we represent in upstate New York. Archer Jake Kaminsky from Elma, the current #1 ranked pole vaulter Jen Scher from Churchville, volleyball player Matt Anderson, born in Buffalo, swimmer Ryan Lotke, born in Rochester, and 2-time U.S. Soccer Female Athlete of the Year Amy Wambach of Rochester. Throughout their lifetimes of training, hard work, and sacrifices, these athletes embody what it means to be an American, and they carry with them to London the pride of Western New York and its entire nation. And as we wish them and the entire team good luck. My wish is that that sense of common purpose that joins all of us as Americans during that Olympic period will join us on this floor of Congress as we seek to form a more perfect union. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
For what purpose the gentleman from North Dakota rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last night, the House Ag Committee finished its work on the Farm Bill late last night, and I applaud Chairman Lucas and the Ranking Member Peterson for their work. I rise today to call for full consideration of the Farm Bill before the House. Agriculture is the backbone of North Dakota, and North Dakota farmers and ranchers deserve the stability and certainty that a long-term, reauthorized Farm Bill would provide. With the Farm Bill passing through committee, with bipartisan support, including strong crop insurance, now is the time for the full House to act on it. I urge my colleagues to join with me and work together to get this bipartisan Farm Bill passed. Thank you, and with that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Patricia Dewey Houghton, beloved wife of our dear colleague of 18 years, Amo Houghton, passed away last Friday. She was a playwright, a linguist, a poet, who together with Amo formed a special type of power couple. Patricia was intelligent, curious, gracious. She was the perfect partner for Amo. While her efforts 40 years ago led her to introduce children and adolescents to joy and creativity, here in D.C. with Amo, she fought against rancor and mean-spiritedness in our nation's capital. Priscilla was the first honorary member of the Congressional Bicycle Caucus. Cycling was significant to her because of an early bout with polio that left her bedridden for a year. Priscilla was a very special woman whose battle with adversity never slowed her down or dimmed her spirits. Our hearts go out to Amo and her family and friends gathering for her memorial service in Boston this Saturday.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As the next consent to address the House Bill 1 minute revised.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to honor Marcia Geisler, an Illinois native and a recipient of the 2012 National Fire Protection Association's Fire and Life Safety Educator of the Year Award. Marcia serves as the Downers Grove Fire Department's Public Information Officer, and in that role she coordinates with emergency service personnel to provide Downers Grove residents with valuable life-saving information and safety-related materials. She is also assistant to the chief and a juvenile fire interventionist. And to help others promote safety within their own communities, she published a 400-page reference book, Fire and Life Safety Educator, the most easily accessible reference book of its kind. Madam Speaker, Marcia Geisler's more than 20 years of excellent public service have demonstrated her commitment to keeping our community safe, and I want to commend Marcia for her leadership, her dedication, and her hard work. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday New York State Attorney General Eric Snyderman was in Western New York to celebrate the passage of New York State's iStop law. This law uses online databases to connect doctors and pharmacists, helping to combat the tragic prescription drug abuse epidemic. I was pleased to join the effort by leading a bipartisan state delegation letter in support of this law. While there are many important players in the passage of this bill, I would like to especially congratulate Senator Tim Kennedy, Avi and Julie Israel for their efforts. The passage of iStop raises awareness of the growing importance of integrating health information technology and electronic medical records into the field of health care. Mr. Speaker, I am hopeful that other states move to implement this and other electronic medical record technologies. This is a serious problem and it is our responsibility to act swiftly. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Question unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, now that the health care law is out of the judiciary process, it's back in the hands of the legislature. It's time to face the real consequences of this law. This week, the Ways and Means Committee has started examining the tax effects. The Oversight Committee is looking at the impacts on patients and doctors and on the economy. But in reality, we know what to expect. An average American family will see a $1,200 increase in health care premiums after this law is fully in effect. More than 1 million Americans are at risk of losing their plan because their plan was denied a waiver. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated that we will see 800,000 fewer jobs by 2012. The law contains 22 new tax increases, and 9 in 10 seniors with retiree benefits will lose their retiree prescription drug coverage through their employers. It's time to get specific with the American people about what this law means for them. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Friday, President Obama signed into law a bipartisan compromise which extended a lower student interest rate of 3.4%. Incredibly, the ink was barely dry on that measure when the Romney campaign released their higher education plan, which would take us back to wasteful taxpayer subsidies to private student loan lenders. This is what the conservative Cato Institute said about that proposal. A meaningless change from a college affordability standpoint. Obviously, it would have effect for banks who would be happy to go back to that. It was a great gig for them. A Romney supporter at the New America Foundation said, on this issue, Romney is just ridiculous. His campaign staff doesn't have any new ideas, so they just said, let's go back to what we were doing before the Obama administration. For young Americans, the choice this fall is becoming clearer. We had a president who successfully challenged this Congress to protect a lower student loan interest rate, and his opponent who is looking to take $60 billion in taxpayer funds and give it away to special interests. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, when I am back in Southeast Texas, I hear from individuals and businesses who are concerned about how Obamacare will affect them. Ava, a senior in Houston, tells me this. I am a senior who is very concerned that I will lose the great health care that I am presently receiving under Medicare. I am pleased with my doctors and with my health care plan. At the present, I can afford it, and I am concerned I will not be able in the future if Obamacare goes completely through. And I also might not get the care I need for the health issues I currently have. Seniors cannot afford Obamacare, nor do they want it. Living on limited income today is hard enough for me with this new health care plan now wanting more of my money. Seniors seem to be taking it on the chin tremendously on this issue. Madam Speaker, Ava is right. Obamacare is not good for seniors on Medicare. They will pay more for less care because of this expensive government takeover of America's health. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
One of the most significant congressional accomplishments in 1965 was to create a program whereby American citizens could have the opportunity for nutritious foods. The SNAP program allows 46 million Americans to avoid being hungry. The benefits go to deserving individuals. 15% are elderly, 20% are disabled. The average gross monthly income per food stamp household, $731. The average net income is $336. Now we see an effort to roll back these benefits to these vulnerable populations. The Ryan House budget calls for $35 billion in cuts. The Lucas-Peterson plan, marked up last night, calls for $16 billion that will result in 3 million Americans losing basic nutrition. Madam Speaker, this proposal will hurt real people, literally take food off of their table. It's wrong, it's immoral, it's irresponsible to take food away from deserving American citizens to balance a budget that is unbalanced because of reckless policies that have benefited the rich. I urge my colleagues to develop a balanced approach to deficit reduction to include cuts, new revenue, but food should be out of the conversation. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill H.R. 4402.
Without objection. Pursuant to House Resolution 726 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 4402. The Chair appoints the gentlewoman from West Virginia, Ms. Capito, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 4402, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to require the Secretary of the Interior and the Secretary of Agriculture to more efficiently develop domestic sources of the minerals and mineral materials of strategic and critical importance to United States economic and national security and manufacturing competitiveness.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Chair, the United States of America is rarely last at anything. Unfortunately, that is not the case when it comes to permitting mining projects. In 2012, the U.S. was ranked dead last, along with Papua New Guinea, out of 25 major mining companies on the pace of mining permitting. Now, I can't speak for Papua New Guinea, but the reason the U.S. is so slow to issue new mining permits is simple: government bureaucracy. Burdensome red tape, duplicative reviews, frivolous lawsuits, and onerous regulations can hold up new mining projects for more than a decade. These unnecessary delays cost Americans jobs as we become more and more dependent on foreign countries for raw ingredients to fuel manufacturing and our economy. The lack of American-produced strategic and critical minerals are prime examples of how America has regulated itself into 100% dependence on at least 19 unique elements. Rare earth elements, a special subset of strategic and critical minerals, are often used as core components for the manufacturing of everything from national security systems to consumer electronics to medical equipment to renewable energy components and everyday household items. Even though America has a plentiful supply of rare earth elements, our negative approach to producing these crucial materials has resulted in China producing 97% of the world's rare earth elements. Just like the United States' dependence on foreign oil causes pain at the pump, Americans will soon feel the impact of China's monopoly on the rare earth element market. Those impacts will be felt when they need a CAT scan, or they want to buy a new computer for their small business, or purchase an iPhone, or install solar panels on their roof. H.R. 4402, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act, introduced by our colleague from Nevada, Mr. AMODEI, will help to end this foreign dependence by streamlining government red tape that blocks American strategic and critical mineral production. First and foremost, this is a jobs bill, and the positive economic impact of this bill's intent will extend beyond the mining industry. For every metals mining job created, an estimated 2.2 additional jobs are generated, and for every non-metal mining job created, another 1.6 jobs are created. This legislation gives the opportunity for American manufacturers, for small business, technology companies, and construction firms to use American resources to help make the products that are essential for our everyday lives, and in the process, this will put Americans back to work. As China continues to tighten global supplies of rare earth elements, we should respond with an American mineral mining renaissance that will bring mining and manufacturing jobs back to the United States. The National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act will help supply our national security, high-tech, healthcare, agriculture, construction, communications, and energy industries with homemade American materials. This bill is the latest example of the House Republicans' commitment and focus on American job creation. The House has passed over 30 job creation bills that still sit in the Senate. where their leaders unfortunately refuse to take any action. This includes several bills from the Natural Resources Committee to increase production of our all-of-the-above energy resources and to protect our public access to public lands. H.R. 4402 will enable new American mineral production. We must act now to cut the government red tape that is stopping mineral production that furthers our dependence on foreign minerals. So I urge my colleagues to vote yes for this underlying legislation, and with that I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may.
Gentleman's recognized.
It is really quite fitting that the Republican-controlled House of Representatives is taking up a bill today to weaken environmental regulations for the hard rock mining industry, because just last night the President held a lavish $25,000 a plate fundraising dinner out in Montana. And for those who don't know, the Daley Mansion, where that event was held, was owned by a famous guy, Marcus Daley, who was one of the 3 copper kings of Montana. He was infamous for his epic battles with other robber barons for control over the copper industry in Montana and around the country. In fact, the Supreme Court's recent 5-4 decision to invalidate the Montana election law of 1912, known as the Corrupt Practices Act, overturned a law that was originally enacted to respond to the very excesses of mining barons like Marcus Daley. So here we are, out here on the House floor, embracing the Gilded Age. But here in the Republican House, we're not in a Gilded Age, we are in a giveaway age, where every week the Republicans seek to hand even more giveaways to the oil and the gas and the timber and the coal and the mining industries. And the bill we are considering today is so broadly drafted, where apparently sand and gravel and crushed stone are considered rare and strategic, that the majority actually appears to be trying to usher in a new Stone Age. Under this bill, the next time you go to the beach, you should put some sand in your pocket, because the majority apparently believes that it is a rare element. That gravel in your driveway, protect it, because under this bill, it is apparently strategic to America's national security. Rare earth elements are indispensable to a wide range of military, electronic, and industrial applications, as well as a variety of clean energy technologies. But this bill isn't giving us just a futuristic technologies of the Jetsons, it's giving us the prehistoric technologies of the Flintstones. Volumes of reports have been written about rare earth minerals and other critical and strategic minerals, and none of them define things like gravel or sand and clay as critical or strategic minerals. What we could be doing, what we should be doing on this House floor, is developing a policy to break China's grip on the rare earth minerals that are important to our high technology sector and to national defense. But we aren't doing that with this bill. No, what we are doing here is using strategic and critical minerals as a pretext for gutting environmental protections relating to virtually all mining operations. Now, because this is a GOP giveaway game show here on the House floor, in fact, when the majority has cast so many votes to benefit these industries, it gets hard to keep track. So we have created this chart to help everyone keep track of which industry is benefiting each week in the GOP giveaway game show. Yesterday, my colleague from Utah seemed extremely interested in making sure this chart functioned properly in order to aid the body. So I brought it back today so we can give it a spin and make sure we all remember who is getting a special giveaway today. But for the Republican Congress, this isn't the game show Wheel of Fortune. This is the Wheel of Fortune 500 companies, where we can spin to see which large multinational companies will get handouts. In Jeopardy, you state your answer in the form of a question. In the GOP House of Giveaways, answers are stated in the form of questionable policies. And the GOP's final answer in their running game of who wants to be a millionaire is always the same. It is the largest corporations in America at the expense of American taxpayers and the environment. In fact, the majority is bringing this bill chock full of giveaways to the mining industry on the floor without addressing the 140-year-old loophole that allows mining companies to extract gold and silver, uranium, and other hard rock minerals from public lands without paying taxpayers any royalty payments. This ripoff is even worse when you see that every Western state actually charges royalties of between 2 and 12% for companies to mine hard rock minerals on state lands. But on federal lands, which might be right next door, the mining companies don't have to pay taxpayers a dime in royalties. The robber barons are long gone, but mining companies can still operate under a law put in place during their heyday. Yet the majority's answer is not only to do nothing to end this free mining on public lands, they are trying to hand even more giveaways to this industry in this bill. This is a bad bill, and it should be defeated. I reserve the balance of my time.
For what purposes, gentleman from Washington rise?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lamborn, who's the chairman of the Energy and Minerals Subcommittee of the Committee on Natural Resources. 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the Chairman. And Madam Chairman, I am pleased to speak in support of H.R. 4402, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2012, introduced by my colleague, Representative AMODEI, of which I am a co-sponsor. This bill was heard in our Energy and Minerals Subcommittee on April 26th. Although Americans hear a lot about our dependence on foreign oil, they may not know about our dependence on foreign countries for minerals, critical to our manufacturing, national defense, communications, and medical care needs. Over the years, we have allowed frivolous lawsuits and unnecessary regulations to stifle our domestic production of these vital minerals. Today, the United States is nearly 100% reliant on countries like China for rare earth elements that are essential to our economy. We should all be troubled by China's recent policies restricting exports of these critical minerals, but rather than complain about that to the World Trade Organization, as the Obama administration is doing, we should simply support our efforts to allow production of and access to our own vast domestic supplies. This bill is a bipartisan plan that cuts red tape by streamlining the permitting process for mineral development and will create jobs and help grow the economy. Under current laws and regulations, it could take a developer up to 10 years to get all the government permits in place. This bill would shorten that time down to just over 2 years. These minerals are essential components of technologies and everyday items ranging from cell phones, computers, medical equipment, renewable energy products, high-tech military equipment, and building supplies. They are vital to our country's manufacturing sector and our ability to create jobs. Every job in metals mining creates an estimated 2.3 additional jobs. It's time for America to get serious about rare earth and strategic minerals. We can start by opening up our $6 trillion worth of untapped mineral resources. I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
What purpose the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Yes, I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I thank my friend, the ranking member. Madam Chair, today we're considering the so-called National Strategic Critical Minerals Production Act of 2012. Now, despite the bill's title, it has almost nothing to do with national strategic critical minerals production. In fact, under the guise of promoting the development of minerals critical to the United States national security, this legislation would reshape mining decisions on public lands for almost all minerals. You heard Mr. Markey talk about gravel and sand and other things that can fall under the definition here of critical minerals. It's a list of problems with this bill that is long, and several of the amendments we'll consider today will attempt to address the egregious provisions that would truncate important environmental review. Make no mistake, this is a giveaway. It is free mining, no royalties, no protection of public interest, exemption from royalty payments, near exemption from environmental regulations, near exemption from legal enforcement of the protections. And it's unnecessary. Mr. Speaker, the Natural Resources Committee has already reported out legislation on a bipartisan basis to lay the groundwork for developing critical and strategic mineral production. Nearly a year ago, July of 2011, yes, 12 months ago, the committee reported out H.R. 2011 on a bipartisan basis. The National Strategic and Critical Minerals Policy Act of 2011, by unanimous consent. That bill would improve our understanding of critical strategic mineral deposits and aid in their development. That legislation is not only bipartisan, it's supported by the National Mining Association, for heaven's sake. The President and the CEO of the National Mining Association, Hal Quinn, issued a statement when the bill was passed out of committee saying, quote, "The House Natural Resources Committee took important bipartisan action today to ensure U.S. manufacturers, technology innovators, and our military have a more stable supply of minerals vital to the products they produce and use," end quote. He went on to say that legislation, quote, "will provide a valuable assessment of our current and future mineral demands and our ability to meet more of our needs through domestic minerals production," end quote. Yes, a year ago we reported out a bill on a bipartisan basis that would do what this legislation purports to do. And instead, we're taking up this legislation, which is a giveaway. The legislation we could be dealing with actually deals with strategic and critical minerals. And if the majority were to bring it to the floor, I'm sure it would pass in an overwhelming bipartisan way and would likely be passed by the other body and signed into law. We should be able to work in this fashion when it comes to improving our supply of rare earths and other strategic minerals and ensuring that we're not dependent on China and other nations for their supply, but the majority is not interested, evidently, in working in a bipartisan fashion. Instead, they're moving this bill, H.R. 4402, which has almost nothing to do with strategic minerals, and is really about giveaways to the mining industry. The bill's a Trojan horse. Has no chance of becoming law. Why are we playing these games? Why are, I should say, they playing these games with our need to develop strategic minerals? We should be working in the kind of fashion that led to last year's bill. The majority should shelve this giveaway to the mining industry and bring up the other Critical Minerals Policy Act to the floor immediately. I yield back my time.
A gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Nevada, Mr. AMODEI.
The gentleman from Nevada is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to follow on the theme from my colleague from the Garden State. Why? Why in an 11.5-page bill that does two things, sets a 30-month, not rock hard, no pun intended, time limit on federal permitting decisions for mines and says if you don't like that decision you got to sue in 60 days. Why are you not talking about what's the problem with 2.5 years to talk about the permit? What's the problem with providing some predictability to the timing of the permitting process? What's the problem with not stringing people out under NEPA for over a decade for mine decisions? Why are we not hearing about that? The giveaway stuff is phenomenally entertaining. This does nothing to tax law. This does nothing to safety law. This does nothing to supplant NEPA. And this does nothing to supplant any state things. This is an 11-plus page bill that says you got 30 months. And by the way, if you both agree, you can use more than 30 months. Well, what's the translation of that? God forbid we have collaboration between an applicant and a federal land use agency in this process. Why are you afraid of collaboration? Why are you afraid of setting a time limit? And where in the 1969 NEPA law, since we're talking about old stuff, does it say this is a marathon, and if you can outweigh them, forget about the facts, forget about the science, forget about the technology, we're going to obfuscate and delay and hope that you will go away. Because you know what, my hat's off, it's become a great weapon in this. But when less than 1% of the surface area of federal land in this nation is impacted by mining, I think what it's really about is we don't want any predictability for this because we're basically against an industry. And, you know, everybody's got a definition of strategic. When you talk about transportation, medical devices, national defense, the economy, I think those are strategic and critical things. So I would urge your support on this to bring some collaboration truly instead of making this an administrative marathon for purposes of permitting. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yes, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The bill we are considering today isn't about ensuring our supply of, quote, strategic and critical minerals. This bill is about deregulating the mining industry and the pipeline industry. It's misnamed, and it should be renamed the Koch Brothers Mining and Pipeline Deregulatory Act of 2012. It's consistent with everything that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been about during this 112th Congress. It's been about deregulation, it's been about tax breaks for the wealthy, and it's been about cutting the ability of government to do what it needs to do. While they're cutting the ability of the federal agencies to assess the propriety of these kinds of activities, mining and gas line production, while they're cutting the ability to do that, they're reducing the time within which the remaining assets of the various agencies have to do the work that they are supposed to do. And I tell you, it's important that we assess the environmental impact of various proposals on our environment. But my colleagues on the other side don't care about the environment. Almost a year ago, the Natural Resources Committee produced H.R. 2011, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Policy Act, a bipartisan bill that actually did address supply vulnerabilities for truly strategic and critical minerals policy. I was proud to work with Ranking Member Markey and Chairman Hastings to co-author that legislation, and it was passed unanimously by their committee. That bill, H.R. 2011, would have passed this body with broad bipartisan support and would probably pass the Senate too. It could have been a rare glimpse of actual governance in this totally politicized Tea Party House of Representatives. Unfortunately, I understand that bill was obstructed by Republican leadership. I wonder why. Could it be the Koch brothers? Things go better with Koch. Could it be because the mining industry instructed them to attack environmental regulations instead? Did someone get a phone call from Rush Limbaugh with instructions?
Rather than bringing the bipartisan H.R. 2011, here we are. 30 seconds?
I yield 30 additional seconds to the gentleman.
Thank you. Rather than bringing the bipartisan H.R. 2011, here we have a wolf in sheep's clothing, a bill that purports to serve our national security interests, but in truth just seeks to undermine environmental regulations that protect the health and well-being of Americans throughout this great country. It's just another episode in a long saga of misleadingly named Republican legislation, bills that claim to help the country but really just help the special interests. What a shame. I yield back.
Madam Chairman, I yield myself 30 seconds before I yield. And I would yield to the gentleman from Georgia. If he can tell me in this 11-page bill where environmental laws are gutted. Now I'll yield to the gentleman. If he can give me a specific, what page?
Well, you know.
No, I'm asking you a question. I'll yield to you if you respond to my question.
You asked me a question.
What page? What page?
The overall scheme of this bill.
What page?
The overall scheme of this bill is
what page? I ask you.
Take away
I asked the gentleman. I'm yielding to him to respond to me on what page.
You're not
the gentleman can't respond.
You're not interested in
the gentleman obviously can't respond. I reclaim my time.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Gentleman has his own time. He can.
Gentleman from Washington.
I am very pleased at this point to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, a member of the Natural Resources Committee.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 4402. My home state of Arizona is known for the 5 C's: cattle, cotton, citrus, climate, and lastly, copper. People have been digging in Arizona for precious metals like copper for centuries. In the 1850s, nearly 1 in every 4 people in Arizona were miners. Without a doubt, mining fueled the growth that makes Arizona the state it is today. Today, the Arizona mining industry is alive, but it is not what it used to be. A wide array of other critical minerals such as copper, coal, uranium, lime, and potash are mined throughout my district. These projects employ hundreds of my constituents with high-paying jobs, jobs that pay over $50,000 to $60,000 a year plus benefits. In rural Arizona, those types of jobs are few and far between. In fact, they are few and far between across this country. But there is some potential, and there's so much more. As you can see from the graphic, rare earths and other critical minerals have been discovered throughout rural Arizona and are suitable for development. These minerals our country badly needs to meet the demands for production of everyday items like cell phones, computers, batteries, and cars. So what is a holdup? As I travel throughout rural Arizona, talking with companies that do business throughout my state, the message is clear. The length, the complexity, the uncertainty of the permitting process is stymieing the development and discouraging investors from committing to the U.S. mining. If you do not believe this, how about a real-life example? I will give you an example right out of rural Arizona. Down here in Safford, in the southeastern part of my district, is a home of the newest mine in North America. It took 13 years for all the necessary permitting. Imagine that. Time is money. I was the first co-sponsor of H.R. 4402 because the government has to work more efficiently. This legislation streams the process and sets benchmarks while ensuring continued environmental protection. Let me be clear. Despite what the opposition says, this bill does not exempt the industry from complying with environmental regulations. It tackles the problems on the government approval process. Let's restore some sanity into the permitting process and get America.
Gentleman's recognized additional 30 seconds.
If the current bureaucratic gridlock was to be in place 150 years ago, I do not believe Arizona could exist as it does today. Copper would not be one of our 5 founding C's. Please, let's restore some sanity to the permitting process and get American miners back to work. Vote yes on the National Strategic Critical Minerals Production Act. Our economy deserves and depends on it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I thank the gentleman. I just wanted to address the point raised by the committee chair. Where in the bill, he asks, are there exemptions from environmental review? Well, Section 102 is where they are, right at the front of this bill. Page 4, if he wanted to know the page number. Under Section 102, the lead agency can determine whether the NEPA law, the National Environmental Policy Act, even applies to a particular project. The whole idea of the National Environmental Protection Act is that there would be an independent review that involves public input, input from all affected interests, and input from somebody who speaks for the land and somebody who speaks for the trees. One of my colleagues a few moments ago said mining affects only a tiny fraction of the land. Well, that is if you ignore everybody who's downstream and downwind. Section 102 allows deferring and relying on data from reviews that have been performed not under NEPA standards. They say, the majority says, well, state reviews should suffice. Well, does anybody remember a state called Montana that was controlled by copper interests? Do you think that state's reviews of a copper mining environmental impact would suffice? Well, that's the kind of thing that would be permitted under this legislation. It would be whether to prepare a document, the determination of the scope of any review, the submission and review of any comments from the public. They could say no public comments are permitted. I consider that a real abrogation of our responsibility and, yes, a real removal of environmental protection. I thank the gentleman and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
I yield myself 30 seconds to respond to my friend from New Jersey. He talked about Section 102. Section 101, which is the basis of all this, really talks about what the President did with his executive order by improving performance of federal permitting and review of infrastructure projects. Now, we are simply duplicating what the President has already said is okay in other areas. With that, Madam Chairman, I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pierce.
Gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of H.R. 4402, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act. It's nice to hear on the floor that who it is that's speaking for the trees in New Mexico. We've just burned down 300,000 acres of those trees in New Mexico because of the voices coming from Washington saying, don't cut a single one of you. Let the fuels build up in those forests until they burn down. All of this bill is doing is saying, let's hold our government accountable to some standard of performance. We want our government servants to do the same work they would do in 10 years in maybe 30 months. That is not an unreasonable assumption for us in America who are looking for the jobs. New Mexico used to be the home to 11 rare earth mineral mines. Those are the ones that create cell phone batteries, the minerals that create technological things. And we now have pushed those out of New Mexico and the rest of the West, and we've pushed them over to China so that they have the jobs and we no longer have them in this country. We have people here who are willing to scream foul on every single thing when we ask the government to simply do its job in a little bit more efficient manner. We actually did that in the 2005 Energy Policy Act. An amendment placed in the Resources Committee actually improved the permitting process. It had categorical exclusions. It created pilot offices. I just had a chance to visit with the State Director of BLM this last week. He said that our processes are so much better today because of that bill. That's all we're trying to do in this bill here today. H.R. 4402 simply listens to the President. We were talking about from the other side of the aisle we should rename it. Well, why don't we rename it? We're listening to you, Mr. President. You asked on March 22nd for our federal permitting and review processes must provide a transparent, consistent, and predictable path. The President is asking for it, and this bill simply gives it. The reason that we don't have jobs in this country is because we're sending them to other countries. Companies cannot wait for 10, 12, 15 years. They can't invest in that permitting process to get to the time, to the point where their process is finished. 30 seconds.
I yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
They can't invest 10 to 12 years in a permitting process to be told at the end of it, we're sorry, we're not going to do it. We could call this the let's reinvest in American green jobs. Green jobs require aluminum. 100% of that is imported. Green jobs require nickel. 100% of that is imported. Green jobs require platinum. 91% of that is imported. Our friends on the other side of the aisle speak from both sides of the mouth. We want green jobs, but we don't want to have any of the productive assets here. We want to import them from other countries. Let's reinvest in America. I yield back my time. Thank you.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yes, I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Could I first ask how much time is remaining on
yes.
either side?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 12.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Washington has 15 minutes remaining.
Okay.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey as much time as he may consume.
I thank the gentleman for giving me a chance to clarify further the point raised by the chairman that this does not eviscerate environmental protections. I talked about Section 102, and the chairman came back and said, well, Section 101 just refers to the presidential order that allows certain infrastructure projects to move ahead with expedited environmental review. First of all, it is only expedited environmental review. It's now with removal of environmental review, and that was talking about specific critical construction projects. What this would do would allow exemption essentially from environmental review for any of the materials that go into the construction project, including gravel and sand. All of that would be exempt because the mining companies could negotiate a timetable for each step of the review process. The mining companies could enter into a negotiation for determining whether there would be public comment or whether partial previous reviews would suffice. Furthermore, Section 103 directs the agency overseeing this project to prioritize, to give highest priority to maximizing production of the mineral resource. In other words, that relegates any review, any challenge to the regulatory process to secondary, tertiary, or non-existent status. It says maximizing production has the highest priority. This is a giveaway to mining companies. This is not about providing strategic and critical minerals. The other side has talked at length about the importance of these minerals to our modern technology today for batteries and cars and magnets and all sorts of other things. They're right. We should be ensuring a good supply of these things. But this bill does not do it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Before I yield to the gentleman from Michigan, I yield myself 30 seconds. The gentleman from New Jersey disparaged, I guess, sand and gravel. Madam Chairman, I would point out to you that I think after the earthquakes in Northern California when roads collapsed, and earthquakes in Southern California when roads collapsed, and when the bridge collapsed in Minnesota, I have to believe that those people felt that sand and gravel was a very critical mineral at that time. That's why this bill is broad in its definition of critical minerals. And with that, I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, a member of the Natural Resources Committee, Mr. Benishek.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, I come to the floor today to express my support for H.R. 4402, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act. This bill will expedite responsible mineral production in the United States by reducing federal red tape and speeding up the federal permitting process to create new mining jobs. My northern Michigan district is blessed with abundant mineral resources, from copper mines in the Keweenaw and Houghton to iron mines in Marquette and the western parts of the Upper Peninsula. Mining has been the foundation of northern Michigan's economy. Currently, mining contributes over $4 billion to Michigan's economy annually and employs over 30,000 people. Today, new mining operations in northern Michigan are being explored. These mines have the potential to create thousands of new jobs. In fact, just last week I visited one of these new mine sites and was able to see firsthand the work that they are doing to responsibly utilize Michigan's vast copper resources. Regrettably, the federal government and Washington bureaucrats have been standing in the way of new mines across this country. Due to lawsuits and government inefficiency, the current process of acquiring permits for a new mining project can take more than a decade. That's right, a decade. While our economy is struggling, we cannot afford to wait 10 years while the federal government sits on its hands. We need to encourage the responsible use of our mineral resources to create jobs and keep America competitive with the rest of the world. Madam Chair, I encourage all members to support this common sense legislation to speed up this process and create jobs. If we can get the federal government out of the way, I'm confident areas like northern Michigan can flourish once again. I yield back the
Gentleman
remainder
yields
of my time.
back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield the gentleman from New Jersey as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, I have used the phrase giveaway, as have others today, several times. The ranking member spoke about the wheel of giveaways. One day it's oil, another day it's timber. Today it's mining. And there's a lot of concern about the special interests that are represented here by this. Well, I offered an amendment to this bill to ensure that the companies involved, the mining companies, cannot continue to extract valuable minerals for free, minerals that belong to the American people, without accountability for their expenditures to obtain political influence. My amendment, which unfortunately was not allowed by the Rules Committee, would have simply required that mineral exploration and mining companies disclose their contributions for political influence over the previous 5 years in order to obtain new leases. Perfectly legal and I would say perfectly reasonable. The Supreme Court decision in Citizens United ruled that corporations may spend freely in elections, and that, I believe, constituted a blow to popular democracy. It overturned a century-old doctrine, going back to Teddy Roosevelt, restricting corporate money in campaigns. The flawed decision opened floodgates on corporate spending to influence, maybe even to dominate, our elections. Because of that decision, American democracy has come to be defined by super PACs and similar organizations. The amendment I offered would have helped to restore some sanity and transparency to this process by requiring that mining companies disclose their campaign contributions over the previous 5 years in order to receive new leases for public lands. As Speaker Boehner said on Meet the Press a few years back, I think what we ought to do is to have full disclosure of all the money that we raise and how it is spent. I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, said Speaker Boehner. I agree. We should be doing that in this case as well. Promoting the development of minerals that are critical to core national priorities and genuinely susceptible to supply disruption, like rare earth elements, should be an area where Democrats and Republicans can work together, not one where special interests advance one partisan interest over another. Unfortunately, the majority's hurry to give yet another handout to the mining industry means that we are not having that debate here today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time. I stand here today in support of my friend and colleague Mark AMODEI's bill. I think it's really important that we use America's resources responsibly to grow jobs in this country. We need American jobs using American resources and not relying on foreign imports and driving our jobs offshore. And especially this is important when it comes to our mineral resources. And, you know, we've heard all the rhetoric on the other side of the aisle, all that stuff. Let me just talk to you about the Eastern Oregon miners. These are individual men and women They are very blue-collar. They are not part of the wealthy class you hear talked about here. They've just been trying to work with this federal government for over a decade to be able to use the mining claims that they have, and the Forest Service has grouped together 49 mining plans of operation for analysis and approval back in 2001 and 2004. In 2005, the Forest Service decision to approve the plans was then litigated. It resulted in requirement the agency reduce some of its analysis. Today, 11 years later, the federal government still can't get their work done. And this is in an area that at one time in our history produced some of the most substantial gold in the United States, and silver and other minerals that we need. When you pull out all your gadgets, all our little electronic gadgets, you know what? If it wasn't for the mining interests in America, you wouldn't have those gadgets, because that's what goes into what we use. We need to be able to use America's resource. This allows us to do it. The 42 mining operations in Baker County, if they were allowed to work, and these are individual small, these are just average Americans just trying to do what they're allowed to do under federal law, but held up because of the federal agency's inability to get their work done, or unwillingness to, in the North Fork and the Burnt River and elsewhere. If they could just move forward, if they could just get an answer out of the federal government in something short of 10 or 11 years, they could be producing jobs, they could be producing mineral resources and wealth for this country, America, the United States of America. We could create jobs here using our resources, our mineral resources. Some of these people have died waiting. You shouldn't have to die waiting for your federal government to get its work done. That's why we need this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yes. Could I ask once again how much time is remaining on?
Yes, gentleman from Massachusetts has 7